Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry for that delay. It's just been one of those nights, storming out at this neck of the woods. So internet went down. Can't promise it'll stay up, but fingers crossed. So we are broadcasting live for now on the United Public Radio Network, New Orleans, UFO Paranormal Radio Network 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. So tonight, we are fully sponsored by our wonderful people over at Folgers Coffee who've been a part of our journey since day one. So thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so very much. Big thank you to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, for his contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for the intro that you just heard. Big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the mastermind behind all of our logos and banners here at the show. Big thank you to him as well. So tonight, guys, we've got for the very first time Matt Roeske, who is the founder of Cultivate Elevate, to bring back information that's been suppressed and cause our society to become sicker and weaker, definitely less educated, I would say, on many levels. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of really amazing things. So I have sent him the link. So we're just going to kind of hang in there and see. So 1 second. I am just having a little bit of an issue just trying to get all of my information up because everything went down and I do apologize. Bubbles, of course, is not with us, unfortunately. She's, had a lot of, has had some situations at home. They had to put down their pup, who's been a part of their family for a really, really, really long time. He was quite elderly, and I think they're just going to have a little bit of quiet time. So again, tonight it's just going to be us and you guys, and yeah. So again, just trying to bring up some information. DOR Wednesday. Oh my gosh, nothing wants to come up for me, guys. Nothing. But that's okay. We will manage, won't we? We will manage. So nothing saved when this whole computer went down. But with that being said, oops, I think we got one. Oh, there's one. All right. Not the one I wanted, but I'll take it. So we are just waiting for Matt to come in. And honestly, I went, this was like Amelia. Amelia said, you really need to, check out this TikTok page because I don't really spend a lot of time on TikTok. So I said, yeah, of course, let's check it out. And holy crap. I thought, yes, let's ask him if he would come on and check us out and hang out with us for a little while. And he did, and it was awesome. He was just wonderful. So hold on. I think I've got this here. Okay, so here's the link. Okay, hold on, guys. Bear with me. Sent you the link there. Okay, there we go. Let's see what happens. Maybe he's having problems too. I don't know. Anyway, I went and checked out his TikTok page and found him on Instagram and Telegram and YouTube. And I just thought this man was bloody genius. It's like you think, all this stuff. You know how you guys know I just always got this stuff that goes on in my head. And people look at me and go, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, yeah, damn good one. Anyway, I basically got validated many times over and thought to myself, yes, this is good. Like-minded individual, love it. And we're gonna tackle some stuff tonight. And I recommend anyone who has not check out some of the videos that we put on the group page to go and check him out at Cultivate Elevate and find him again. TikTok, Instagram, Telegram, YouTube. Just do it. And you're going to come back and say, what the heck? And I'll say, yes, I knew it. I was right. So anyway, without further ado, our special guest. Yay. Hello.
What's going on? Thank you for having me on.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you for your patience. This never happens to me ever. And unless it's the network's got like a tornado or a hurricane or something. And it went down. And I'm just like, can't be a thing. This never happens to me. So anyway, thank you for your patience. I appreciate you so very much. And I've really been looking forward to this. Amelia right now, as I know, is really disappointed because she's the one who had reached out to you, and they just have things going on in the family. But I know she's watching, and I know she's just face palming herself thinking, why is this timing always what it is? But anyway, I've checked you out on TikTok because I'm not a big TikTok person. You know, Amelia's on there a lot and she's always scanning for the show and things. And I have to say, you're absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you for that compliment. And it's funny because I was actually just banned on TikTok. They completely wiped my account of 300,000 followers. And
no.
I created another page, which was Cultivate Elevate 2. And every time I would post a video, it would go up against the community guidelines. And they banned that account too. So that was all actually probably within 1 week or 2 weeks, a short amount of time from when the last videos were up there.
I watched, I don't know, like 50 videos of yours just yesterday on TikTok.
Maybe you watched the clips. We have
the
a
clips.
page.
Yes.
That's the only one that's still there. My main pages are gone. They completely wiped them after I showed the weather, our weather that's being changed and things like that.
Right.
And I showed that here in Arizona. I filmed it and I put it up, and then I showed I did like an eating healthy one, 5 things of how to be healthy. And then both videos went against the community guidelines and they completely wiped the account.
Oh yeah, they don't want you giving any like good health information, of course, Well, that's okay because I followed you on Telegram and Instagram. So I've got my bases covered. But I am sorry for that. It's sign of the times, and that's a whole other show. I'm sure that would get us both banned if we went down that road. But I wrote out a list. I know, we had settled on some things to talk about. I want to talk about all of it. And because of some of the videos that I've watched of yours, I added, a couple of things. But where would you like to start? I mean, I'm all about, like, you've talked about so much about frequency and energy and the pyramids and all of these, ancient civilizations and things that were being suppressed. Where would you like to start? Because I want to know it all, especially now that I can't go back on TikTok and find it.
We could start on anything you want. I mean, I talk a lot about electroculture. I talk a lot about the old world buildings, all the beautiful antennas that used to be on top of all the old world buildings.
Yes.
And always the first thing, which is always removed during the remodel of the old world buildings. They're always taking the antennas off the tops of the buildings. And those beautiful antennas that were on top of those buildings would gather the ether, the unlimited energy that's all around us, the 5th element. And it's interesting because ether used to be on the periodic table before 1908, but it was removed. And then we had a new periodic table that completely got rid of that. And then from there on out, we kind of have lost touch with that because Einstein debunked all of that and said that it's not true and that whole shabil. And then from here on out, we've never really dabbled back into that. But through my work and a lot of the videos that you might have seen and things like that, I've done a lot of things going, okay, if we look at this looks like it's an atmospheric generator, or it gathers energy from the air, or from the ether. But, we aren't taught about this because most people don't know, but about 1910s, 1920s, Rockefellers took over the educational system, created the General Education Board, so everything that we've been taught that you have to unlearn. And I've spent the last years unlearning everything that I've been told and realizing that it's always quite the opposite. But, we can go whatever avenue you want to go. I'm more than happy to talk about.
No, I love it all. I love it all. Thank you for that. Let's touch why don't we start with pyramids? Why don't we start with pyramids? I mean, you go back in the day, everybody had like pyramid power. Everybody's heard of pyramid power, but have people really grasped it? Because I mean, Nikola Tesla had a really huge interest in it, and I found it fascinating when you talked about bees and frequency. So why don't we start there?
So the pyramids are an interesting one, and there's over 2,000 pyramids on the earth. We always are focused on Giza. They always show us Giza all the time, and they're like, this is the only one, and whatever else. But there's about 2,000 of them. There's actually pyramids in Bosnia, which are 4 times the size. So
Yes.
this is an interesting one because nobody talks about that. Google tries
Right.
to debunk that all the time, which is funny. But
Right.
the Bosnian pyramids are 4 times the size. The pyramids in Mexico are 3 or 4 times the size as well. But there's
Right.
pyramids scattered all over. There's pyramids here in Arizona. They just look like a mountain, and they have some cactuses and trees growing on top of them. But they're
Right.
all over the place. And it's interesting because when you get into the materials of the pyramids, you get into a lot of sandstone. You get into a very highly conductive, highly energetic, material. And then
Right.
a lot of the pyramids too, they used to be gold on top of them, and they also had limestone. If you've ever felt limestone with your hands, if you put your hands on limestone tile or anything like that, you will feel
Right.
the energy that comes right off of that because all the quartz. So, when we think of these places where they would put the pharaohs and mummies and all that other nonsense that they tried to
Right.
you
Right.
start to sit there and go, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why, for example, do a lot of the pyramids have mercury underneath them? You
I
know,
did not know that.
yeah. So a
And
lot of them,
I've been to the Great Pyramids of Egypt.
yeah. There's a lot of the pyramids in Mexico have pools of mercury underneath them. And what's
Mhm.
interesting is I bought some mercury and I was testing it out. You put it in front of a voltmeter and you
Mhm.
spin it, and it will
Right.
create voltage. So if you think about the mercury underneath the pyramids, if
Right.
it's spinning and you have this pyramid on top with this conductive material, and then the gold on top as well too, and all of that, then you have one big energy generator. And then there's also the cymatics, which are at play. When
Mm.
people are in there, they talk about the sounds and the frequencies, what they feel, almost like an out of body experience because of the resonance or the frequency of the material that's being used and the sacred geometry. And
Mhm.
it was interesting because when you look at Les Brown's work, he
Mhm.
talked about how you could put food in a pyramid and you could preserve it indefinitely.
Mhm.
So then you think, okay, maybe somebody knew how to live to 1,000 if they were living in certain shapes. And this
Okay.
goes into the work of Dan Davidson and Shape Power, his whole books on these things. But shapes all emit a frequency, a fractal, cymatics, whichever word you want to call it. So if you think of these pyramids as these gigantic, basically machines,
Right.
and they could preserve the body, they could also charge areas, they could uplift the energy, similar to the old world cathedrals and the bells and all of those things.
Yes.
They're all
Yeah.
energy generators. And I think the more, it's funny because the more you look into it, the more you realize why a lot of people just point your head towards Egypt and Giza and that's it. But
Yes.
there's so many of these. And then you start to sit there and wonder, well, how did they communicate? And this takes it to Philip Callahan's work, where he was talking about like the Celtic round towers, which are just
Yes.
absolutely remarkable, that
Mhm.
monks would go to the top of a Celtic round tower and they would communicate amongst each other because of the materials of the Celtic round tower. And they use them as like cell phone, like kind of like communications and whatever.
Right.
So then you think with the pyramids, if somebody knew how to build here, they were obviously communicating with someone else somewhere else, and they would
Mhm.
all be able to build the exact same way. But it's, the more you get into all of the things with shapes and pyramids and materials, it
Mhm.
gets interesting. And everything, like I said, has a resonance and a frequency, and the materials of every single thing that are these things are being built out of
Mhm.
all are very, very specific. That's for sure.
Well, they're even saying you can sharpen razor blades.
Yes, yes,
Right.
that's there's a patent on that actually,
Oh,
and they
'cause
they they would put a razor blade in a pyramid, and it
Mhm.
would sharpen itself. And it was actually a patent that was done, I believe, in Japan. But they would just keep sharpening them because the alignment of if you were going to go into the iron, would
Right.
shift, and then it would get rid of all of the dullness. So then
Right.
you sit there and think that's real time. This is happening in real time. Like, how many things can change in real time? And if we take it a step further, we go into the Ebner effect, which was a Swiss scientist who
Right.
basically understood that if you took seeds or fish eggs and placed them into high static fields, you could change them into something you would never imagine, which is like kind of going into the giants. So if you think about if the energy of the pyramids could change, let's say, the molecular structure of the body or the molecular structure of food or things like this, then imagine the potential of a human or whatever animal if it was placed inside this shape with that resonance all the time.
Right. Right. So in your opinion, I mean, people say that we can go into alpha state and you can reach like all sorts of crazy frequencies while laying in there. I mean, I had phenomenal experiences in there, but people were, we go back to the time of the 70s and you had the whole pyramid movement. People were building these things in their backyards and they were experiencing incredible things through meditation and such. So all of these were aligned. Like, for example, we'll go with the Great Pyramid of Giza because this is what everybody's the most familiar with, even though they're literally everywhere. I think so many of them have just been grown over, under forest. Oh, it's a mountain. No, right? But if you factor all of that in and it's built and lined up with the star system, why would they have done that? Does that contribute to the frequency somehow? Or because Dolly says, hold on, let me just get, sorry, Dolly, I don't mean to, I'm just trying to catch up. She says that each pyramid has a different frequency. I didn't know that.
That's what they say with the pyramids in Bosnia, that each one is emitting a different frequency. And I believe Samir went and tested all of them. They went with
Wow.
I think it was a biofeedback machine, and he tested all of the frequencies, and each one was emitting, I think, a different sound frequency. So like one was 28 kilohertz, I think the other was like 24, another one was 20. But yeah,
Right.
like when you think of all of these, the resonance and the perfection that goes into these things, you sit there and go, okay, somebody understands a lot more than what we think, and it's interesting because like carbon dating, for example, is as accurate as a PCR test, so we don't really know when it
Right.
comes to like a timeline. Somebody could tell me this was 1 million years ago, but this could have been 200 years ago. I started thinking maybe this is more like a lot of things start at 1831. That seems to be about that date. But when I find books, they always like stop at like 1831. It's like there's no discoveries, no nothing. It's just all of a
Right.
sudden it's like old wise tales, and it's like nobody was discovering; they were just writing stories.
Right.
So I sit there and kind of think, okay, maybe this stuff could be more recent. Maybe there was an event, maybe there was like a static field discharge where everything like flipped and like things went up and things went down at the same time. Water went up, water went down. And then there was this event, and then things just kind of, went away. And there were people who survived, but the people who maybe were a part of this, this creation of such beautiful architecture
Oh,
seems to have all disappeared. Because I look around daily now. I mean, if you see what people build, I mean, it's the most ugliest thing. Everything's in a
that's true.
box. There's no shape, there's no architecture, there's no nothing. And
Right.
it's funny because there will be people who will be like, when I was looking at all the stuff with the world fairs and stuff, they were like, we built that, but it's like that stuff was already there, and
Right.
the real question is, who built this stuff? You get into like the elongated skulls people and all the stuff that,
Yes.
people who used to be around. You go into like Cro-Magnon and that whole situation, RH negatives, the bloods, and all the different stuff with the bloods and everything like that.
Absolutely.
You start to
Absolutely.
wonder a lot, and that's why I'm big into like asking questions, like
Right.
look at something that someone told you, and whatever it is, even if I'm telling you, just look at it, go back and do some research and see what you think. It's like watching
Yes.
the moon landing. It's
Yeah.
comical.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. No, I agree with you on that one. But no, I cross-reference everything to death. Believe me, I love learning new things. So it was refreshing when I was listening to you and watching you speak about a lot of these things because I've seen and noticed a lot of that. I'm a world traveler, so I love architecture, I love culture, I pay attention to everything. And I mean, you're looking at structures that lasted, but they're still up. I stay in places that are from, like the 12th century or, or 11th century. Like the older, the better. I want to be able to connect with all of that energy, especially like old stone places, because stone does, you can imprint on it. You can feel that it can speak. It holds voices. It's like a recording.
Yep.
People don't realize that either.
Yeah, and everything has a material and a resonance. I mean, I get heavily into stones. I've gotten heavily into stones and copper and quartz and gold and silver and lapis and lodestones. Lodestones are real cool. They got hit by lightning, so they got the magnetic charge. But I mean, everything has a frequency and everything has a resonance. And we've lost the connections to those things because we've moved to things with DuPont plastic and then a bunch of steel and iron. And that's pretty much it. And like you
Right.
said, everything, back then, everything was built with stone, with different
Yes.
types of materials, even stained glass windows. You get into the whole beauty of the stained glass windows and the blues and the reds and all the colors, the
Mhm.
alchemy that would go into the windows to create a window. Just
Right.
all this. That's the thing. It's like all this beauty that it was
Right.
about creation. Everything was they weren't just building something. They were creating this just remarkable structure that would touch your soul.
Right.
And now, like I said, in Chicago, you got a bean. You got a little silver bean, and that's architecture. So you just,
That's true.
which
It's
actually I
true.
think is Mercury, but that's another story.
Right. Right. And I mean, things cost so much to make too. So, like, I mean, I'll give credit where credit is due. I suppose we can't recreate some of the things that we've had, way back when. But I mean, I own a lot of old stained glass church pieces just because, like the church windows and such, because I do love it for what it is, the fact that somebody put all of this together. But I love the color spectrums as well. And I know you speak about that also. Hopefully, you have that on Telegram or Instagram for people to go check out. All of your links are in the show description, so people can definitely go and check it out. Um, Going back quick to the pyramids, what is your thought on it? Some people will say, no, they were built as communicators. The Atlanteans built them. They had the help of extraterrestrials. What is your take on that? Because there's a lot of different theories, of course.
Well, I think the information is all around us. I think we can
Okay.
tap into this information. It's kind of like when
Right.
people go, "I got to download," and they're
Right.
sitting out in nature, and nature
Right.
just tells them, but the information's always there. As for what I think they are, I mean, I think they were energy generators and also communication devices.
Right.
I mean, when you look at them, I mean, it's just remarkable the detail. And then also, I think they were used for healing. A lot of the times, it's interesting. Like even Samir was explaining, people going into the Bosnian tunnels and they were
Right.
healing. They had all these health ailments. They would walk around the tunnels for, let's say 30 minutes and they would be
Mm.
healed. And so then you sit there and think, you know, are we supposed to live on like underground?
Mm.
Maybe that's kind of something that we don't think about. Like we're up here,
Right.
and maybe our bodies are also meant to be underground. We
Right.
don't think about these things. It's like we just keep building up. We build
It's
skyscrapers,
true.
nonsense, and whatever else. So maybe we should be building, down. And it's
Mhm.
just something interesting to think about. But yeah, I think mostly like communication, healing, even
Mhm.
energy, because there was water underneath them as well. There's all this beautiful, powerful water, and we know that water can create a charge. So, somebody understood the benefits of structured water. And
Right.
these pyramids and these buildings and these things were all about water. Even if you look at all the world fairs too, water, water, water in every single one. They would
Yes.
craft these like canals and just beauty with water. So
Right.
it's all about, I think, personally, I think it's almost like creating something to support Mother Earth rather than something to harm Mother Earth. I think that's
Right.
what they were doing.
Right. Right. Yes, I would agree with that for sure. Okay, well, we'll move along because I could stay on pyramids for a while. I just love talking everything pyramid. But I did not know about the Mercury pools under the pyramids. That's really fascinating. And, I visited a few different places in Egypt, and, I'd love to go to South America, but they've never had any mummies in there. There was never anything in there at all. So that was interesting to me. They're like, oh, go down over here, go to the Queen's Chamber. And I'm like, why don't we just do that? But I'm down for the adventure of crawling way down on my belly. I'll do it. So who could say that, I wanted to also touch on, and I can never say this, Dysianin aura goggles.
Oh, yeah, the glasses, the copper-based glasses. Yeah. Yeah, so those were used to block out the blue and green color spectrum.
Yes.
And they used a special copper dye to block out color spectrums. They work like prisms.
Yes,
everybody's glasses.
I'm trying to do this without blinding everybody, just to try to give somebody an idea. Hold on. There
you go.
Okay. See? Does that work? There. This is what you pretty much see. And they're kind of pinky. And these, aren't like the typical ones. Apparently the people who made these had access to Dr. Walter John Kilner's papers.
Yep.
And they apparently improved on them. Just received them. I'm one of those like cross-reference till you're dead sort of things. So we're going to find out. But yes, they're a thing. So can you talk about, do you know about the story when they used them apparently in, was it World War II?
Yes, so there was, the glasses were used, he created those back in the 1920s with Kilner, and he was doing stuff with alchemy and dyes. They were copper-based dyes. Everything's always blue, and that blue always has the copper in it. That's how you always kind of tell it. Always leads back to copper. But the dyes themselves would actually block out the blue and the green spectrum. So you would see different spectrums. And these work similar to prisms. Everybody's glasses that they wear, they're like prisms. They're allowing you to see by giving the prism is the frequency or the fractal that you're depicting. But those were used to just see different color spectrums and see people's aura. That's what it gets into. If you take prisms, if you don't have those glasses, you can get prisms too. Yeah. Triangle prisms, and you turn them and you put them right about here, even when the sun is reflecting or if you're sun gazing or whatever, and you'll start to see all the auras. You'll see the auras of plants. It's almost a purple or green, kind of like that color with plants. You'll see the aura of materials, of stone. Colors will all be kind of distorted and you'll see a different thing. But those little glasses were basically to determine somebody's health. They would be able to see kind of like your aura, kind of like Kirlian photography. And you would be able to see the aura, the essence that's coming from the body. And then from that, you would be able to determine how somebody is healthy or not. And it's interesting because if you think about it, your aura extends, like it extends through this computer. Your aura extends with energy and up to about 30 feet. So if you could modify the wavelengths in which you can see with the visible light spectrum, then you would be able to see the aura. Similar to when people take mushrooms, and do all of those things too, because they're altering the wavelengths of the eyes so that they can see more spectrums. And it's cool because like even tensor rings, you'll see that they kind of like mush the earth if they're sitting on top of something based on changing the color or changing the wavelengths of our eyes. But the Kilner's, the glasses is an interesting one. And it's interesting too, because a lot of the people who created a lot of these things in that time frame, 1900s to 1920s-ish, a lot of their stuff just disappeared. Books disappeared, books got burned, books got suppressed, like Wilhelm Reich, they burned all his books. All these people, they got rid of a lot of information because this taps us in. This allows us to see something in a way in which we cannot see with the visible light spectrum. And if you think about it, if you could determine, let's say, your health by just seeing your aura or your essence, then you could determine a lot about yourself and you wouldn't need the current system that we have. So I think that those glasses go really well with Kirlian photography and just a great thing for people to look into. Right.
They piqued my interest because of a story about World War II pilots who were wearing, the original design. I guess they used them as a sort of night vision, which I found very curious because you can't see anything at night with these things. So obviously they must have been tweaked, to be able to.
They had an infrared. That was the red. The one you're thinking of it was a headset that was a red color spectrum.
Yes.
And they were seeing all kinds of very scary things. I think it was during Vietnam, actually. But they were seeing all kinds of scary things and freaking out. And it was because they were picking up on the different color spectrums. And I remember, I think they were saying this was Vietnam, because the one guy, I believe he had a Gatling gun. And he just started shooting at the air because he was seeing all kinds of things. And that's the thing, like, when you think of color spectrums, you know, we can only see like the rainbow of what we can see. But there's so much more around us. And also, too, maybe they spiked their stuff with something, too. You know, you can 1970s, they had, what was it, Operation Honeypot? You know, they were doing a lot of spiking and giving people a lot of things during that time.
Right. Oh, they tested those poor people with many different things. But you also mentioned the Rh negative blood, which I always find very fascinating because it's very talked about now. I mean, my parents are both negative blood types, and back then I'm aging myself a bit, but back then the doctor was like, "How in the world did you two ever find each other with such a small percentage?" You know, and right. So now, of course, back then where there may have been only maybe 7% way back, now there's like what 13 to 15%. What's your take on that? Where do you think it comes from?
This is an interesting one because when you get into it, they talk about blood that can't clot. So when something is put into the blood that the blood does not clot, and that's where the whole bleeders came from. A person would get cut, and they would bleed. Then you get into blue bloods, you know, the blue hues. And this is an interesting one too, because when you look at the fish or the crabs that have blue bloods, you know, you start to sit there and go, okay, I can kind of see maybe where this can kind of go. You have a copper-based blood over here and an iron-based blood over here. And it's interesting because that's red and blue, which is the same color spectrum that makes up everything. Everything's always red and blue. Even when you look at politics too, it's always red and blue. But, you know, with the color spectrums, you sit there and go, okay, copper-based, iron-based. Copper is very highly conductive. Iron is more magnetic. So, you know, you start to sit there and go, interesting. Now, where did this come from? This is the question that nobody seems to be able to answer with all the testing and science that we have today, that nobody can track back where the blood types came from. What was interesting is I found a picture where they showed the negative blood types and they showed the positive blood types, and they showed that the negative, it was the couple different negative ones all had a bluer blood on the piece of paper that they were using, versus the other ones had a more red hue. So, you know, you start to go, okay, maybe this connects into something that we don't understand, because that's the thing. We always try to, you know, determine something, and they say that the Rh positive came from monkeys, and the Rh negative, they don't know where it came from.
There's no rhesus factor.
There's no rhesus. So then you sit there and go, okay, well then what are you comparing it to? And if you can't compare it to the rhesus, then what should it be compared to? And that's where I kind of started looking at color and going, okay, if something had blue blood or a blue-based blood, what things have that? And it's interesting because it's fish and octopuses and crabs. And then you start to sit there and go, mermaids? You know, fish.
Octopuses aren't even from here. They've determined that they're completely alien species.
Did you ever see where they turn off the TV?
No.
They know how to turn off the television. Yeah, there was an octopus sitting like right in a little thing, and they had a television next to it. You can look up the video; it's funny. Yeah. But the octopus gets out of the tank, turns off the television, and then gets back in the tank.
I love it.
So they know, they're smart. They're like, I don't need Operation Mockingbird or whatever else. But you know, it's an interesting thing. And then I kind of think of like, you go into the Basque people, you go into the Berbers, you know, you go into all these people.
Scotland.
Who possess in Scotland, Ireland, Celtic bloodlines, you know, the Highlanders and all of them.
My bloodlines. My bloodlines.
That's all connected into that. And the thing is you go into this older bloodline, because that's kind of what that goes into, and then you sit there and wonder, well, then where did those people come from? You know, if there's this percentage, where did they come from? Was there another part of this realm we haven't explored or not allowed to go to? You know, and they just kind of came down from there, because that's what they always talk about. You know,
they do. They believe there was some sort of
you know.
Yeah, 30,000 years ago, they estimate some sort of extraterrestrial intervention,
Something.
to
Yeah.
well, the missing link, where is it?
Yeah, and that's and that's why like
I don't
when
know.
I started studying, like even just getting into the blood type things, I started asking people, "What's your blood type?" And people were like, "I don't know." And I go, "How are we roaming around if we don't know what our blood type is?" And it's all these things where you start to just question and go, "Well, okay, I do know it now, then
Right.
where did it come from? And where did these things come from? And why are there certain, if you go into the colors of the eyes,
Mhm.
two-tone eyes, certain features, things like walking into a room and turning off electronics, which is a
Mhm.
very interesting one. I mean, I've experienced it. You walk under a light, the light turns off, and it's just like, okay, but then you
Mhm.
sit there and wonder how much voltage is being created from your body.
Right.
And this is where, certain blood types can disrupt electrical devices. And
Right.
then you sit there and go, okay, what are you, like a Super Saiyan? You can charge up, but there's monks who have been shown to create fires with their hand. So if
Yes.
you could create a fire with your hand, imagine what your blood can do. And
Mhm.
then you think of this whole donations of blood, plasma, where they're trying to always kind of, do something. You
Mhm.
sit there and wonder, it's almost like the life force energy of the person, and you want
Right.
now take it out of somebody, and then whatever you do with it and whatever. But it's a very interesting one when you get into this, because it just leads into Sixth Sense and all the like 1,000 different rabbit holes of blood types,
Right.
forums and RH negative forums, and all these things and whatever.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I there's so many different, um, theories on it. You apparently people who are abductees or contactees, many of them are known to be RH negative. Not that RH positive people don't, have contact or are not experiencers, but when asking people who have been taken or have had interaction, there is probably 70% that have said that they are RH negative. I'm an experiencer.
I was going to say, I think that's interesting too, because I was just thinking of how I was reading about how an O negative blood type can also give blood to a dog.
Yes.
And then you get into like, the canines or canites, that whole
Right.
terminology. But then you kind of sit there and think, man's best friend and that whole term as well too. And you sit there and think you're connected to the dog. I mean, I've
Right.
had experiences where dogs will just sit down next to me. They
Right.
just sit there. Like it's just like we are connected. It's
Right.
wild. So then you start to sit there and think, okay, maybe we're part in this dog world or something. And in Egypt too, you look at like all the
Anubis.
hieroglyphics and things like that and whatever, and you see, a blue dog man, and then you sit there and go, is somebody connected with these? Was there some maybe interbreeding? I don't know. But then you
How
get
about cryptids?
cryptids, yeah, and you get into
Extraterrestrials.
that too, and little,
Yeah.
blue people and whatever,
Right.
little people and stuff like that and
Yes.
whatever. So we have no idea of this whole realm, and that's why I've started to just keep an open mind on everything,
Right.
because all the stories of the pharaohs and mummies and whatever else, it just none of it makes sense when you look at the hieroglyphics and you start seeing completely different things. And
Mhm.
also too, with like the dog man or the blue dog person in
Mhm.
Egypt, then you start to sit there and think, were people walking amongst, dog like people who were human, like right next to you? Like, was there a dog like person? Because certain dogs too have a very distinct connection with us. It's like humans prefer certain dogs, if you think about it. Like even like Labradors and whatever. There's always like
Right.
certain dogs that are really connected. But
Mhm.
it's a really interesting thing when you get into it. And like you said, even with cryptids and all going that route, what used to exist on the realm or the plane is a great question.
I agree. I agree. And you look at depictions of Anubis, who was, your god of the underworld. He was a upright canine type animal, half man, But there were also in these hieroglyphics, there were the pharaohs were green skinned in some cases as well. And you start looking at depictions of crafts and UFOs and all kinds of things, light bulbs. It makes you realize just how much things have been kept from us, but it's stuff that's hidden in plain sight.
100%. I mean, there's so much of what you just said with the light bulbs. There's,
Yes.
even the Ankh, which is just a power generator, and
Yes.
based on the shape and the sacred geometry, it can create energy. It can also be used as a dowsing rod too,
Right.
which I thought was really interesting because everybody used to be going around dowsing, finding all the water, gold, silver, gas, oil,
Right.
anything you want to find.
Right.
So like you said, people are very in tune. It's
Yes.
just as the Rockefellers and the Smithsonian Institute and that whole nonsense kind of took things over, they started teaching us that people were cave people and they're running around with hammers and they're building pyramids out of papyrus. They're using like papyrus rope to pull it and whatever, just silly things. And then you sit there and look at the pictures and go, oh my gosh, this is totally different than what I've been told or sold, through what I've been learning about.
Right. Yeah. Tamara says the ancient Baghdad battery. I actually have a friend. That one went missing, apparently, but I have a friend who has one in England, and it came from a crazy story. It came from an underwater excavation that they found off the coast of England. It was a friend of his. He found all this stuff. And he got images back in the 70s. He had to go to the US military to get images from the satellite, which he paid for, but of course tipped his hand. So Men in Black showed up, confiscated a lot of the stuff that he had, but thankfully there was stuff he didn't have on site and brought to my friend. And he did a show with us. He showed it to us. He goes, here it is. It's under lock and key. And he was told by these Men in Black to never return there again. So what was so special about this place? It's off the coast of England. And it's underwater.
That reminds me of the crystal skulls, and
right?
them finding the crystal skulls in Bermuda around the triangle and then deep in, I forget what it's called, but Bisbee or Bisbee, whatever it is. But they found all those crystal skulls deep in the ocean, around the Bermuda Triangle. And then you sit there and wonder, who created a complete skull out of crystal, out of pure quartz and crafted so perfectly, and it's just wild because there's so much in the ocean too. You get into, you're going into how much is deep below there that we don't even see, even the internet cables, which run through there too, which is funny. But those are deep in there too. But you sit there and go, how much is actually below us? Because we're seeing at this level, which has been demoed, TNT'd, bombed, blown up, whatever it may be, wars to reset things and get rid of everything at the surface level. But what is also down deep in the ocean? And it really has made me think about things because after about 1920s, nobody's really going deep into the ocean and nobody's really going high up, up in the sky. Because you got rid of the blimps, and then anybody who was doing stuff into the ocean, they probably took the technology. So we're kind of left with this surface. But if your friend found, like a battery deep in the ocean,
it was given to him. It was a friend of his who was a diver.
So
it was given to him for safekeeping. He goes, I don't want any of this near me. The whole Men in Black experience, I guess, was a bit much.
I could imagine. But if he found that whatever depth it was, then you sit there and think, why were there batteries? You're going, I don't know, let's just go 1,000 feet just to make it easy. But you're 1,000 feet below. When did the water then take, over that area or that civilization or cover that? Or why did the water do that? Because you could start asking the why and the what and the when. But when did all these things occur? And then who were those people using that technology? It gets crazy when you get into this whole thing of, going into places like, it's funny, like over here in Scottsdale, they have like a little spot where there's these like massive boulders. They're just absolutely massive. They're stacked on top of each other, perfectly aligned. And they look so out of place. There's like 8 of them that are just massive. It's by the Seven Springs, if anybody ever wants to go. But there's these massive boulders. And then if you go to the left of there's a cute little sign with like some stones thrown in a circle. And it says like, this is how the people who were living there were, building houses. Right. And you sit there and go, okay, over here doesn't even make any sense because how did the get stacked on top and are still sitting perfectly aligned? But over here, it looks like they threw a bunch of, the government threw a bunch of stones in a circle, and then they're trying to tell me that they were living in huts. And what's wild is it's on top of a mountain too. So like you're up there, you sit there and go, well, then how did somebody get here? Similar to your buddy with the battery, how did somebody get all the way down there, and at what time frame was that?
Right. I agree. You look at some of the structures out there, and it does not make any sense as to the construction. Some of it is so big that you would have to be, shall we say, maybe a giant to, to be able. I mean, you got steps that are, ridiculously big. Why would you need that?
Or those old books that you see that are like bigger than 6 feet tall.
Yes.
Like books like that. And then you sit there and go, well, why would you have a book that's over 6 feet tall, or even a door that's I've seen the old world doors. They're 200 feet tall, made out of copper and bronze, which requires a lot of materials and a lot of prep time. But then you sit there and think, what were you moving? And when I went to India, it was interesting because there was one of my buddies was saying that they were doing stuff with elephants, but I thought this is absolutely enormous. I was standing next to what looked like this. It looked like this. It was 4 wheels, and it had a little. It was all wood, and it had a little part where you would sit on top, and it looked like it held something very large. And I remember sitting there and going, "This is like something out of like the 300 movie." When like the Xerxes or whatever comes out, and he's just on this massive throne. And then you sit there and think, were people gigantic at this time? Like, when did we get so small?
Well, if you notice, they even made him appear to be considerably bigger than what he was, even, in real life. Like, makes you, so history tells us maybe he really was.
Yeah, maybe they're, that's part of, they always throw a little bit in there of the truth, but then everything else is all a bunch of nonsense. But, they do throw a little bit in there. But and when I rewatched it, all the jewels and things that he was wearing, I was like, that's all copper and brass and gold.
Funny that.
You sit there and see, interesting, about materials because everybody's wearing them. And then you look at like even the Spartans, they have a bronze shield. And it's an arrow, which is, it's all moving as one. They're moving as a unit, like a cymatic, just moving through. But you get into all of this, and you start to see that, like, everything of this connection to these bigger people and something of like what we haven't been told. And my thing is now, because I started kind of getting into fields and like static fields and these things, is my thinking is when the Rockefeller electricity started to roll out, it started to shrink down the people because the fields are dampening our health. So if you think about it, it would make the people smaller over time. And like maybe people get smaller and smaller the more they're exposed to electricity and radio frequencies at the same time. It like shrinks them because a lot of the big people were before 1920s. There's so many pictures of massive people.
There are.
1887, electricity rolled out.
Right. And then you started just getting remnants of these giants. Well, to me, when the information gets suppressed and the Smithsonian's throwing giant bones into the ocean, there's something they don't want you to see. Then you start getting into other parts of the world. I mean, here we have, giants that, they basically said, oh, they were like, we've seen people in our lifetime that are 8 feet tall, 7 feet tall. I had friends who were like 6'7", for God's sake. So another foot wasn't a far stretch in some communities or cultures. Aruba had all kinds of giants, I mean, they're out there. But you go out to places like Sardinia in Italy, and they were said to be like 15 feet tall. That's a pretty big teeth. Right. Yeah. Right. So I don't know. See, Dolly says her nephew's 7'2". There you go. It's a big guy. But I don't know. I think when you are starting to suppress information, you have to ask yourself why. Why are they suppressing it? I mean, control, okay. And then we can get into a whole other show, pineal gland and all kinds of sort of stuff. But I mean, this is stuff that ancient cultures all knew about. and they emulated what they saw. You go around to sit and think that ancient cultures weren't connected with extraterrestrials would be utterly ridiculous. Go and look at the structures, the monuments, the hieroglyphs, petroglyphs, you name it, it's all there. To say, oh, they didn't exist. Well, I call BS on that one, right? So,
Well, I think that's to keep us in a certain frequency or bandwidth. That you believe that you came from monkeys, and then after you came from monkeys, you walked around with hammers, and then you
mhm,
just started hitting things with hammers, and that's how you
right,
designed everything. And it
right.
was funny because I went to a museum and they had like hammers from 1700s. And I sat there and thought, okay, that's what you use to build those beautiful, absolute stunning monuments that are so pinpoint.
They're
And
very precise.
oh, it's insane. When I went to India, the totems, the poles,
Yes,
the parts of the buildings were so detailed. It looked like somebody took like a 3D printer and just copy and paste it perfectly,
right,
upside down, every direction. And
right,
then you start to sit there and think, was somebody using sound frequency? They would
right.
hit a tune, and then that tune
Yes.
would just craft the earth. But I think personally, like we were going back to the, why don't they talk about the giants? I think it's just to keep us in the caveman, monkey business,
Mhm,
whatever. And
mhm.
that's what they think of us, so they're trying to keep that. And like you just said with the Smithsonian thing, why would you be throwing away relics? Shouldn't we be learning about things like that? Like those are antiques. And then you're picking
Exactly.
and choosing, which goes into the trusting your science situation. You're
Right.
picking and choosing what part of the science you want to show us, but
Right,
then you leave out all this. And
right,
that's where I think that leads to so much confusion. And then people, kind of regress and go back to, like I said, the caveman monkey thing. But we're much more
right.
advanced than that, that's for sure.
Well, let's face it, with technology now, you have drones, you have lidar, you have all kinds of things that can go over areas and penetrate, ground penetrating radar. You can find this stuff now. The technology is there. And of course, we have these wonderful things called cell phones that have built-in cameras and recorders and they're mini computers. I mean, my phone has bigger hard drive than my computer does. It's ridiculous. But with that being said now, um, people are going out there and they are seeing things, they're capturing things, and they're sharing it all over the world. So it's not as easy to hide. And can we even talk about what the Vatican has?
Oh yeah, it's crazy. And
Okay.
what's funny is the Vatican buildings look exactly like San Francisco in 1899. You look at,
Oh,
yeah, if you go back into San Francisco 1899 and you look at the pictures, you'll see that it looks exactly like the Vatican. So somehow somebody was over there building the exact same thing that they were building in one place, and then you go maybe to another place like Japan and you see
right.
the exact same thing, before World War II. So
Mhm.
you start to see, these same things everywhere. And
Right.
yes, imagine how much is hidden underground, because that's
Right.
another thing in the vaults and
It
the
is.
libraries and all of the stuff that's hidden from us. I mean, that's the thing. We don't even know. Us, all of our research, like you said, it's all a collective research and everybody pulling information together. We're just
Mhm.
putting together, tidbits or small amount of information. There's
Mhm.
so much more. And I think just inevitably humanity will only continue to keep, seeing more and
Mhm.
more. And that's why they're so adamant about trying to ban the internet and put up like IDs for you to sign on to the internet and things like that, because they realize that people are waking up. And I mean, even us having this
Mhm.
conversation right now, there's millions of people thinking like this. It's not just me and you today. There's
No.
every single day I get more and more messages of people going, that makes sense. I just never really thought about it that way. And
Right.
only going to continue. And that's why I always say there's two ways this path is going. One is this, awakened and people are, seeing something different and start becoming self-sufficient and independent.
Mhm.
And then there's another side which still goes, with the caveman and the monkeys and whatever. And I think
Right.
we'll just kind of keep going at that. But 2020 was the catalyst towards this, change like that.
Right. Right. I think I think when you're getting into the grand scheme of things and suppression, it's a cycle that just keeps going on and on. Every 100 years, things change. I think that some people will tell you, we'll switch gears a bit. Some people will tell you that Roswell was a game changer for a lot of things when it comes to, and I want to get into Ron's comment about things changing, the narrative changing, at least for the United States, about we'll move to UFOs, because most of the world has disclosed, right? And even Russia was one of the first countries to disclose what their pilots were seeing. France has always had a program that encouraged its citizens to come forward and share information. Brazil and Peru, same thing. They would talk about it. It would go on to the news. Canada, we had the defense minister, Paul Hillier, come out and say, yes, there's all these extraterrestrials. Yes, we know about them. Then we have the United States, who just don't want to talk about it. And they say, well, come Roswell, things change. But you're saying something a little bit different when it comes to reverse.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the whole Roswell thing, I see it as 3-letter agencies. I see it as Victor Schauberger created the first flying saucer. This was during World War II. And what happened was Victor Schauberger, after the war, was brought over here. They took his technology, they took his patents, they took all of his information. Mm-hmm. And while he was here, he said, so what do you want me here for? And they said, well, we don't really need you. They sent him back, and then he passed away shortly right after that. You know how this one always goes. Right. And right about, it was about 12 years, 13 years later, about 15 years, the Roswell incident occurred. And it was interesting because he created the motor that could spin and create a flying saucer. So, when we get into the flying saucers and this whole thing that we see, I've started to realize it's our own people. It's our own technology. Like we have the technology. Mm-hmm. And then if we take it back a little farther, we go back to War of the Worlds when they did a radio broadcast. This was, I forget what the author was, but he wrote a book and they then did a radio broadcast to see what would happen if people heard that aliens were invading. People started freaking out. They started going nuts. People started shooting people, getting all kinds of craziness because they actually thought that they were being invaded. So if we take it, I like to take it in timelines and in different things. But if we take it and we break it down, we start to see, okay, you kind of built the people up in the 1900s to the 1940s. Mm-hmm. Then you get the technology, and then now you kind of do like a soft disclosure. You got all the soft disclosures, and then you start doing it to the people, and you start flying things around, so people start getting scared. Then you try to do Project Bluebeam, where you'll probably try to stage an alien invasion, 2024, 2025, around election time, always around that time. So you'll try to stage something, and then it'll come with like, we all need to band together in one world. And we'll probably, have to get together because if not, there'll be an alien tax or an alien illness. And that's kind of my thing on it. There is beautiful technology that so many people have created. I think there's so much more that we have no clue. Like you get into bells and all the, the different things that were created with bells and things like that. But I kind of look at it more that it's a 3-letter agency that's been pulling the same strings for so long. And they just do it in different ways, and they learn what people are paying attention to, And when I used to even look into like, Gaia and all of these different broadcasts that would come out here, you look at the top, investors, BlackRock and Vanguard, and then you start to see, oh, that also kind of pairs together with other things, and so this is my take on it, at least how I see it, but it's just. I kind of see it in just a different way because it's been that way for a long period of time, and I wouldn't see it any differently on that situation.
Right. I agree. I think we're definitely into a time where we can start looking at Project Bluebeam. Let's talk about the Miami sighting.
Oh, yes.
Want to do that? Yeah.
Yeah, there was a sighting. They sent out, I think it was 75 police cars.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah. They sent out 75 police cars they were alleged, some 12-year-olds playing in the mall. Right. It said. Right. And they sent out 75 police cars. So then I sat there and thought, okay, maybe they're going to try to do some hologram, invasion or something, or whatever. Like they're going to try to stage something, because my whole thing is people aren't believing any of the nonsense anymore. You know, like as
Right.
soon as something happens, people are like, no way, you know, whatever. They start
Right. Right. Yeah,
like
we're over it. We're over it.
monkeypox and things
Right.
like that, and whatever else funny things. So, you know, I think that it's just, this is opening up the eyes, but they're trying to cue it, you know, because during that they had a lot of people who did, I think, interviews, and they were saying they were seeing these tall gray figures, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that sounds exactly like us talking to the Greys in the 1950s. And then you get into like Project Philadelphia, the Montauk experiment.
Montauk. Yeah. And the Philadelphia Project.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you get into all that and go,
Right.
okay. And if you do it in a certain, you know, timeline, then you can say that aliens are coming. And because if you look at that, I believe it's like that card game, they have an alien invasion on that card game. It was like the Illuminati card game or something. So
Right.
when
Right.
you
They
start
have
to
that.
see- pay attention to these, I've started to realize that it's the same cycle every 3 months. You know, every 3 months, it's kind of like the same type of thing that they're going to try to pull. And that's why I've learned to just, I mean, they're going to keep trying to do nonsense, but I'm going to be sitting over here in nature. You know, that's what I've started to realize, because it's just, they will keep trying to keep us consumed with a lot of this. And there is beautiful technology that's absolutely gorgeous that I'm sure that we have no idea what exists. But I don't truly believe, you know, there's grays or things coming to give it to us. I think that we've already created it, because the more I go back into these books, all of the technology we have today, like 2024, was created in 1901 and 1902. So then you sit there and think, well, then nothing's really new. You know, they had phones back then too that plugged into the earth. So, you know, it's just, yeah, you can take it a billion ways with that one.
Right. I think so as well. I mean, I could see them being really jumpy in Miami because they did have, an incident where there were fireworks and people died, so they're going to take that seriously. But that's a whole lot of cars, for a few 12-year-olds. But I think we'll start seeing more of that. I'm also very interested in your take on crop circles while we're on the topic.
So crop circles are an interesting one, and it
Yes.
reminds me of Mother Earth speaking to us. And I say this because a lot of the videos that have came out with crop circles, they show plasma orbs spinning and then creating a design onto the Earth. And the most fascinating thing when I've gone down these rabbit holes of crop circles is the fact that they are created on the beaches and there's no footprints. And it was interesting because the UK, this was really funny, the UK was trying to say like there was a guy out there with a rake and he was making crop
Because
circles.
they got a lot out there. Yeah.
There is. And there's a lot in that one specific area. But it's funny because the guy is raking on the video and he's like destroying the crop circle. You can see like he doesn't even know what he's doing. But what I believe crop circles are actually Mother Earth communicating between us.
Okay.
And it's interesting. There was a fellow who took crop circles and instead of them being flat, he turned them upright and he started spinning them. And he noticed that when he would spin them, they would look like energy generators. And so based on the spin of when he spun it really fast and took the design and kind of shifted it and everything else, it looked like energy generators. And so I think personally, when you get into these crop circles, they're all in certain places, they're high energy spots. There's a lot of plants that are very unique that grow in that area too, that start growing from the crop circle. Mary Hardy talked about doing meditations in the crop circle with her pyramid power and everything she talked about. But through crop circles, I see it as cymatics of the earth communicating between us. I mean, and that's where I get into like talking to plants, talking to bees, to birds, to all of these things. We have that connection.
Right.
And we just have lost that over time because it's all become considered woo-woo or sorcery or pseudoscience, talking about these terms. But, when you get into crop circles, I think they're one of the coolest things. And the whole reason I got into them was I did an Akashic reading back in 2019. And the lady I was talking to, great soul, she told me to look into crop circles. And she goes, you'll just know what to do with them. And I was like, okay, sure. So started doing a lot of research. And it led me into the electroculture path and the gigantic food and all of those things. But it's all just energy. And if you think about it, if you took a crop circle, maybe turned it into a necklace, place it onto your body, Now you're going to have that frequency on your body and your cells and the water in your body, and it can help you heal too. And I think it's a language. Me and you right now are speaking English, but cymatics is a language. It's so if we think of crop circles, I think of it as a language communicating. We probably don't know what it's saying, but it's a beautiful language. And I think the more we kind of connect into that and understanding that, the more it leads to in all the other topics we talked about today.
Right. I believe everything comes full circle. What I found interesting was, years ago when the government put out a message to ET, they just sent it out on this disc, and it was an ongoing message. And I think it was like 18 months or maybe a couple of years later, where in a form of a crop circle, but not circle, but it was just, like a rectangle. It was a reply to that message, and it was the head of a gray.
Yep.
And then it had all of this crazy, symbols on it. And when they deciphered it, or most of it, whatever they could, it was a response to the message they had sent. So they were wondering, like, is there, time and space, are they so far that it took that long to reach them? Like, there was all kinds of things that came out with that, which I thought, that's very interesting. But there's also a belief, which lends to your theory, that they're actually already here. If you look at the Hopi, they always said they're big-eyed friends who lived underground.
Yep.
And when disaster came, they brought their ancestors underground. So now we're getting back to the underground thing, which, makes a lot of sense. Again, when you're looking at ancient cultures all over the world that were underground. Look at Göbekli Tepe.
Oh,
There's a huge labyrinth under there. There's, Romania, they just found like another ancient library in Romania underground. Like, everything always seems to be under. So we come full circle a little bit on that as well with what we were talking about. So I don't know. I find it fascinating that you have underground tunnels and underground cave systems that people were residing in, all over the world for thousands of years. And here we are above ground, and look how that's going for us. So,
well, and I like how you said that, because then you start to sit there and think, who dug all of that, or who built that out? And it was funny because I was talking to a friend in the UK. Her name's Philly, and she was telling me about how there was a town called like the New Town in the UK. And then when they dug 7 stories down, they found another town, and it was called the Old Town. So then you sit there and think, well, then how'd you even get, when did that happen? How did you get all the way down there? And also, if we go back into the hammers and the picks and all of that, you'd be sitting there like you're born, you're popped out the womb with a pick in your hand.
That's pretty much how long it would take you.
Yeah, by the time you hit 30, when you allegedly don't, live past 30 anymore.
Right.
So then you're already gone. And so that's the thing, like, that's the part that none of that makes sense. And also, digging like that, how are they going? How are they getting into the earth? Were they using sound? Were they using water? Were they using light? Was there some sort of technology? Because even if you look at the Bosnian tunnels and how, when Samir was going through them, he was saying, which I thought was really interesting, that someone has gone back into the tunnels and blocked them. So then you sit there and think, okay, someone went back into the tunnels, started blocking them. Who did that now? What time frame and why? And then if they blocked them, are they in there? Because and this is my whole thought on the whole Bosnian pyramid, is that like one day Samir's going to go in there and see stuff that's just going to, like change the world type of thing. But I think that's why they will not invest a single dollar into that, because of what can be discovered when he actually gets in there to see something that would connect the dots with all of the questions we're saying and all the layers, because like even Giza, they say it's 7 floors below.
It's really far down.
Yeah. So, and nobody's allowed to go down there anymore. So it's like, well, why not?
I went down 1 level. I was allowed to.
Yeah. Now,
because I'm a very good tipper, Matt. They let me go down a level.
Give them a fat tip and say that I'd like to go to, floor level 7 or
I
whatever.
know. What will it cost me? Right.
funny.
No, but you know what? It's true. There is so much down there. I mean, there have been mines discovered that go back like 300 million years ago.
Yeah.
Like, we know we're not the first kick at the can on this planet, We're probably Lord knows how many, but there are traces of, I mean, it was a uranium mine that was found. They figured it was at least 350 plus million years ago. And how about all those out of place artifacts that are showing up that are like completely unexplainable and dated to be so old, hundreds of thousands of years ago, if anything? So, I mean, God, it feels so primitive here,
Yeah.
But speaking of that, let's talk about the 13-month calendar.
So this is an interesting one. People can go onto Google and just type in 13-month calendar, and you'll see the Kodak. I think it's the Kodak film, but they had a 13-month calendar that they actually used to work with. Like all of their workers would work on the 13-month calendar. And it's
Right.
interesting because you think, well, 13, that doesn't seem like a number that you would think of. But if you look at a turtle shell, you see 13 little squares on the turtle shell. And
Right.
that's what people used to follow. Now, why would they change the calendar? Because people go, oh my gosh, like now the calendar has changed and whatever. Because what it does is it throws off the rhythm of the body. All of this stuff is throwing off the rhythm of how our body naturally works. If we believe there's 12 months instead of 13 months, now there's always like an extra month and then one less month. And then when we go through the seasons, which I think are created, but that's another story.
Well,
But when we go
time
through
is created.
yeah, when
Right.
we go through the seasons, then you go into thinking, okay, well, if I change the timeline, I won't understand what's actually going on. And I
Right.
think the 13-month calendar, when they changed all of that, was to try to just throw us off. Because you look at, I think it's like before the 1930s, 13-month calendar was very popular. Then after 1930s, the 13-month calendar goes away, and you see this every single time. You see this drastic change when we go from like hemp to DuPont plastic,
Right.
or a 13-month calendar to a 12-month calendar, like different changes, or maybe the starting of the year, they say around April 1st rather than January 1st. All these changes that have occurred, which have thrown off our rhythm. And then once
Right.
our rhythm is thrown off, we don't know what date we're in. And even today, because this gets into the Gregorian calendar, we don't even know what day or year it actually is, because the Gregorian calendar is like 1,000 years past what the date is, supposed to be or whatever else. So
Right.
now, well, what year am I in? If I say I'm in 2024, I'm like, oh yeah, well, we got technology that still gets 20 miles to the gallon. So
Right. Maybe we're in the 1500s.
yeah, maybe
Real horsepower.
57, 61,
Right.
and we've just been reset so many times. So
Right.
then it looks like we're like starting all over, and then we're the cave people and all that other stuff. But in reality, it's just been so many like different resets. And it's interesting because when you get into the calendars, it then starts to make you think about, moon cycles and the starting of the year and just all these different things that all have been flipped. And that's why I've started to learn to just keep an open mind, because so many things don't make sense for what I was taught, and then now seeing
Right.
it inside.
Right. But you ask an interesting question, and guys, just chime in. If you want to chime in, where did that other month go?
That's a
Could
good
it?
question, because they have there used to be a soul month, which
Right.
is interesting. The month of the sun, and
Yes.
that was usually between June and July. That's a very high energy time because you have the summer solstice around that time too.
Right.
So very high peak energy, and so I think that they eliminated that one because it kind of disconnects us from the sun. They're always like, the sun is bad for you and stay away.
Right.
It's dangerous. The nonsense. It only gives us life and keeps everything alive. But
Right.
it was the disconnect that occurred from us connecting to the sun and celebrating the sun. Because like during the summertime, everybody's got high energy, good moods. Everybody feels good. They feel healthy.
Right.
They're out hiking, doing things in nature. It's all beautiful times. So
Right.
you sit there and think, well, maybe it was that time. Or they say that there was another month in between, I believe it was October and November. And then that was another time in which the 13th month was supposed to be there. I think it's called like Osiphus or Osiphus, something like that. It's another zodiac sign that they say. But, you sit there and go, maybe it was them. I mean, I kind of sit there and think, I kind of just connect more to the nature and the sun. But,
Right.
at this point, I don't know. I just know.
What if there was another zodiac?
What'd you say?
We have 12 symbols of the zodiac. What if there was a 13th? Yeah, if you look at, let's just look at even religion. The number 13 is pretty significant when you look at the 12 disciples, you look at, the Christ figure, you have, 13, there's 13, 12 to 13 of everything. A lot of cultures find this to be very important. And to have, this month just disappear, maybe there was quite a significance to it because everything was 13. Not an unlucky number of people, just saying,
Well, they invert that. That's another one. They always invert everything. Everything
Right.
that's good for you, they tell you it's dangerous and you should stay away from it. And
Right.
I've learned that with especially even numbers and anything, even the sun, even the eclipse. They tell you not to look at the eclipse. I watched the eclipse for 20 minutes. It was the most wildest out of body experience I could ever explain. It was like sunny and dark at the same time and just the most intense download. The best way to describe it. But
Right.
a lot of stuff is just inverted, and it works over time. Because you could also say, well, if you had 13 months, and they switched to 12, what's the big deal? Well, if you times that by 12, 12 years, you've now lost a whole year. Like the whole timeline has been completely messed up.
It's changing.
Yeah, so that's why it's so important for us to know, or at least have an idea, of what used to be, because then we can start to connect, and it resonates more with our soul. You feel the intention, like you feel that and go, that makes more sense.
Well, considering you have some months that are longer, and then February, which is shorter, and what's up with like having a leap year?
That's tomorrow.
I know.
We get an honorary day. We get to celebrate. And have
I know.
Do a
It's this
giveaway.
day that randomly shows up.
Yeah, well, it's a special day. We were given one extra day now. Now we get to celebrate that. But see, and that's the thing. It's like you're just picking and choosing. It's kind of like daylight savings time. That whole thing. And they change things over and they go, oh, well, now you got one less hour of the sunshine. And it's like, well, why? In Arizona,
keep us working.
Well, I was going to say in Arizona, we don't even have daylight savings time. So it's like, and everything.
A lot of places don't have it.
Yeah,
I know, they're eliminating it.
Yeah, it's just so it's all of these things to mess with our circadian rhythm, our ability to pay attention, to focus, to be in tune. That's the thing. I've realized it's like mass confusion, which I think is MK Ultra, but mass confusion to make people so confused that they don't understand, and then they just kind of like, whatever. But for me, it's just been learning all these things and going through these books and collecting books and going through this. It's just really opened my eyes to our true potential of humanity. And instead of kind of like us giving our power to somebody else and saying, they can create it for me, or I can obtain it from somebody, we can do it ourselves, and it kind of takes me that route and connecting back to our roots, which go very, very deep.
Right. Do you find, all we have to do is go back and look at oral history, talk to our indigenous people, wherever, any part of the world that you're at, talk to you're indigenous. They have their oral history, and it was quite different. Like they used to just go through the cycles, your solstices. There was no time. Time is just an man-made invented thing. Ancient people didn't use time, right? So let's talk about that a little bit, because you live out in Arizona, and a lot of parts of the United States have a lot of ancient structures that could be considered, for, let's say, Sedona, for instance. I had Deborah Thunderbeat on, and she does a whole tour and wrote a whole book about Egypt and Sedona. And she showed structures and photographs that darn if they don't look like Egyptian statues of the Sphinx or of the goddess Isis. It's very compelling. And then you hear about the Grand Canyon, where all of a sudden there is a section roped off that you can't go into because of a conspiracy of Egyptian artifacts that have been found and, hieroglyphs and stuff.
Well, I like how you said that, as the conspiracy, because it's like, well, if it is that way, why can't we make the decision? Why can't we see these things and then make the decision on how we feel?
Right.
Why are these things hidden from us? And Sedona is wild. Sedona it's like a polar vortex. You have positive and negative happening at the same time, and then you
Yeah.
have all that sandstone. So it is super, super, super highly energetic. Like as soon as you get in there, you feel it. You're like sunken in, and you're just like into the earth. Like it's almost kind of hard to explain.
No,
But
I understand.
the most
Yeah.
interesting things about certain spots is some spots are so like positive and uplifting, and then some spots are so dark and like pulling you down. Like I remember we went hiking and we went through a place that was called like Dead Man's Path, and I
Right.
remember I literally felt like dead people were underneath me while I was walking that path, and I thought it's kind of weird that you picked this name. Then we went
Right.
to another spot called Devil's Bridge, and it felt like all these people had fallen off this bridge, and it was a very steep, strange energy spot, and it looked like a portal too. It was like
Right.
what was left over of a portal. So then you started to sit there and think, you know that whole Stargates movie we saw, in 2000s, whatever.
Right.
Were there Stargates or some sort of portal that could go through something in different times or whatever, things that our mind can't even comprehend. But then you go to other spots of the Sedona, and it's just you feel just relaxed and like ultra healed. So
Right.
you sit there and go, this is all within, I don't know how many miles Sedona is, but you're all within this certain region. And it's
Right.
interesting too, because when I went to Sedona, when you first enter in, there's all these like old world Spanish buildings. There's like a little shop and all these crystal stores in these old world buildings. And then you sit there and think, who built this? They're understanding that they're building on water. Now they're actually demoing a lot of it and like getting rid of the bridges and things like that. But
Right.
there's all these old world buildings, and then like you said, all this connection to Egypt. And
Yes.
if people in Egypt were, let's say, building over here, then how did they get here? Did they come across on wooden boats? Like we've been told, and whatever else. They're cute little wooden boats, and they sailed across the Atlantic,
Right.
whatever.
Rough waters of yeah.
What we say?
Rough waters.
Yeah,
The little wooden
they
boats.
swam
Yeah.
across. They did it with
Right.
those little wooden sticks.
Right.
So you sit there and go, a lot of that doesn't make any sense. And then you go into the Grand Canyon, and like you said, with the Hopi tribe and all of the things connected into that, and then you start to see that like people are building into the Grand Canyon, and then you start to go, well, how were you doing? Were you hanging from the with a rope and then
Yes.
trying to dig into the canyon? And it's
Yes.
interesting because just south of Sedona is a place called Rimrock. And Rimrock has a primary water well, a well of water that never runs out, because we're never
Wow.
running out of water. That's another myth on the topics of
Right.
things we could talk about. But Rimrock is a very powerful spot if you go to it. The water is crystal blue. Like it's coming
Wow.
out of the earth just so pristine.
Right.
So I almost look at Sedona, Rimrock, Grand Canyon, the Flagstaff, and then part of Clarksdale and all of that. That all looks like something of a volcano. I think there's 2 volcanoes over there, and
Right.
something just went and then just carved it all out. But
Right.
somehow, also at the same time, like you said, somebody was building like Egypt and doing all of these things at the same time,
Right.
which doesn't really add up to the narrative of like it was founded in
Right.
1981 or whatever else, or 1899, whatever the date was.
Right. Well, let's face it, we know that we had people from overseas coming in. The Vikings have been said to be there as early as, the 800s. I know we have had Dr. Kathleen Amball on the show. She's got evidence of Knights Templar, for example, in Brazil around 1250, which kind of predates a certain somebody who was supposed to have come over.
Columbus.
That's a whole other
People
story.
with
Yeah.
these little boats,
Just say it. Yeah. Well, okay, that guy. So, But there's also theories from other guests that have been on who've researched this, that Atlantis wasn't just one island, which they now believe in to be in the Azores, but that it was everywhere. And that, of course, Egypt was connected to them, to the ancient technology, all of these the ancient Sumerians. I mean, you can get into a whole rabbit hole of it. But if that's the case, it would sure explain the travel, because Atlantis allegedly had all kinds of technology to be able to travel by maybe air. Well, I love going down the rabbit holes because they're fun. As hypothetical as they can be, there's a lot of information that's starting to surface. A lot of these cultures, I believe, did have connections to superior, or other individuals who had, whether they're already here, because a lot of people believe that they're actually in our oceans, that they're underground, especially if you start getting into things like inner Earth.
Oh yeah.
There's cave systems with entire ecosystems down there.
Yes. Yeah. And in Thailand, they have I think it's one of the biggest. People can look that one up. It's the largest cave that also has the earth inside of it, and is just absolutely stunning. So then,
yes.
Then where does that lead us? And like you were saying too, with the Atlantis thing, do you think of blimps and zeppelins and people flying around in the air?
Yes.
When we look at a lot of the old world photos of the buildings, the skies are always whited out. They always it's completely whited out. There's nothing flying around. But it was interesting because I had a friend send me some photos from Russia around 1880s, and there's all these blimps flying around. So you start to sit there and think, okay, maybe they didn't move by water cute little boats, Christopher Columbus. Maybe they went by air. And then this kind of changes almost everything, because then you sit there and think, okay, if they understood helium and hydrogen, then what else were they doing at that time? Because they already understood all of that, rather than, sitting around on rowboats and whatever else,
I'll take it a step further. And I don't know if you've ever heard about these, but there's a whole other show that I do with my producer and friend Joe Montaldo, who owns the network that we're on. And it's an information sort of show. And I started researching. It was about 24 hours a week of just research. Have you ever heard of these old wooden sky ships that look like you saw it, in the Mummy? In the Mummy, it's a freaking ship, sails, balloons, right?
Oh yeah.
And they're just going everywhere. Do you know that there are accounts going back anywhere from the 13 to the 1500s? One was in this little old town, and in front of the church, they had men in uniform dropping down from what they described to be, they call them airships, but they were described as what we would call a pirate ship, for example, or a galleon. Mm-hmm. And they would come down on ropes, and they would anchor. They anchored to these church doors. And of course, the people went out of control because they were anchoring onto the door of their church. And they cut the lines, and the guy scaled right back up and took off. And this was an account that they went on to write about. And there are all kinds of stories about this.
That reminds me of the stories where the mountains on top of certain mountaintops, they have boat anchors. And then you start to sit there and think, why on earth would you have a boat anchor on the top of a mountain, at whatever feet? But see, and then that completely changes the whole story, that we were told. And I think too, even when you get to the medieval times and people running around with armor on, then you start to sit there and think, okay, the armor weighs, let's say 100 pounds, let's say 200 pounds, let's say 300 pounds, depending. Some of the stuff was pretty heavy that I saw in the castles and whatever else. Then you sit there and think, well, how are they moving? Because, I used to be in the fitness world. I watched people do 1,000-pound deadlifts, 1,000-pound squats. I've seen it all. But that's one time. That's not like running around with the weight. So, you start to sit there and think, did somebody know how to tap into static fields in which they could levitate? That's kind of where I start to think the medieval times was levitating, the ability to fly or float, and if someone could do that, well, you can't put a tax on that, so that we can't learn about that. And then with the airships, like you were saying, that allows people freedom. When I got into the Hindenburg incident, and one incident that removed all blimps from the air, you start to sit there and think, wow, people flew on blimps and flew 1 million miles around the Earth before the Hindenburg incident. And
Right.
there were
Right.
no accidents. They could drink at a bar. There was a
Right.
library in the blimp. There was like
Right.
literally a dance floor. I mean, it was crazy
Right.
what you could do in a blimp. So you
Right.
start to sit there and go, if you could fly around, that would make sense how they got those 1400, 1500, and 1600 maps. Because you're
What?
getting this aerial view, and then you can
Right.
just draw it out. Rather than if you're down on the ground like me and you right now, it's a
Right.
little hard to determine what's all going around us on
That's
this
right.
little boat, or something else like that.
It's true, and especially if you factor in, like, how old some of these maps are,
Yes.
they're fascinating. But I'll tell you a quick story. My mother, before she passed, would always say to me, "I keep hearing something, and it's always at this time, blah, blah, blah." And I'm thinking, "All right, she's a little elderly. I'm just gonna let it go, and I'm gonna humor her." So I said, "Well, why don't you just record it for me? Because I cannot for the life of me figure out what the heck you are trying to tell me." She says, "It's just strange. I've never heard it before." But this went on for months. So she took her iPad one time and recorded this sound and sent it to me. So I'm listening to it. I said, when you record it, you can't say anything. I know I'm going to hear a passing car here or there, but don't talk, don't do anything, don't have the TV on. She did it. It was very still. And what I heard sounded like ropes, on like rigging on an old sailing ship.
Oh, wow.
And this came from a corner of the house. She lived in a valley. Maybe it's a residual thing. Lived in a valley, which was a small lake. But at one time, it was hit by an asteroid. It was all underwater, all this crazy stuff. But you could hear this thing twisting, and it's like rope twisting against wood. And I'm just like, holy crap. This is a dimensional thing. But it was interesting because, she was hearing it regularly, but only really late at night, at around maybe between 10 and 11 at night. And she could hear this just normally. And she goes, "It's coming from the corner of the house, the foundation." Like, it's impossible. It's impossible. My logical brain won't let me go there. But
Yeah.
yet, I work in a field of high strangeness, so I have to keep an open mind. But I thought that was really interesting. And to capture that on recording was really, really interesting.
Huh. It's good. I mean, you can get into so many things, but it is crazy what is totally possible and what
I
could
know.
exist. Like a dual plane, if that makes sense. Like
Yes.
there's a ship here, and then there's, let's say, your mom's here, and whatever, and like it just you said it can be together, and then
I was just thinking airship. I don't know.
something.
You'll
Yeah, but it's actually there, like it's tangibly there. Perception is wild. I've been thinking
Yes.
about this a lot lately with perception. Like I can look up in the sky and say, "Oh, those are they're spraying the skies to block out the sun." Another
Right.
person might look up there and go, "Those are clouds."
Right.
Perception. But now the question is what is being brought in to the realm? Like you just said, is that airship being brought into the realm based on her perception? Because like she recorded the sound, which means it's there.
Well, she didn't know what it was. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. But now,
Yeah.
is she? Now this is taken to a whole nother.
Yeah.
But is she bringing that in to the
Of
realm?
course. Manifestation.
It's just it gets crazy when you.
I know. I said, "Why don't you try manifesting $1 million? That'd be nice." I don't know what you're talking about with this thing. It's not what I expected to hear. Let's put it that way. And she was just trying to convince me that, no, I'm hearing something. This is crazy, blah, 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 blah. So it's like, all right, I'm just going to let it go. And to my surprise, all I can think of is, again, if she's manifesting it and projecting it, it's like psychokinesis. You can project energy. You can create doors to open and close, footsteps. People say, "Oh, I'm haunted." And I'm just like, no, you're projecting, and it's easier for them to think that there's something in the house than it is for them to think I'm a really powerful being with this crazy energy and I can create all of this crazy stuff around me. I really thought my mother was just projecting. But it just wasn't extreme enough.
Well, if she bring that technology back, we could be flying all over the place, and sailing the ocean blue. Yeah,
I know.
just like
I know.
1492, you know.
I know. I know. It's insane. But again, it's just, it's a crazy world. If we think, let's think like cryptids, for example. We'll use the Loch Ness monster, just because people always see it. Like this, there've been many, many sightings over the last 100 years, especially with technology of sorts. But experts will say, no, the loch isn't big enough to sustain an animal of that size. There's no way in or out. Well, I don't know, portals?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's you get into that and sit there and think, yeah, what or like even when they get into like the what's his face, the big man, the Bigfoot,
Oh, it's a Bigfoot. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
so
the same
like
thing.
something
I,
like
I
that,
know.
or is that like an edited person, who was maybe once used to be here, not here anymore, and then you're kind of seeing it. There's
Like
so much.
imprints in time or something.
Yeah, like you're there at the exact same time to see that
Right.
shift in time, and then you're like, oh my, I saw it with my own eyes.
Right.
But then if it's gone, then obviously people tell you you're crazy. But it's like it's your perception, and that's why I said like
Mhm.
it's so interesting when you go back into perception, because there was somebody, I don't know if it was like Dolores Cannon or somebody I listened to one time, and they said like everything is happening at the same time, but every person is creating at the same time. So there's all these universes, but they're all meshing together,
Right.
but they're not
Right.
actually happening simultaneously. Like it's wild. Like when you start to think about it. So same thing with the Loch Ness monster or anything like
Sure.
that. It's like what can be brought in, or like you said, what could you create, which then it's there.
Mhm.
Or even people when they used to turn into werewolves during the full moon, and that whole thing as well too. As you start to sit there and think, can a person take on, that personality and become the wolf?
Mm.
Because if you think of that movie like Split, where he has multiple personalities and he
Mhm.
becomes the beast, then you sit
Mhm.
there and think it's possible too, because like you just said, it's you are creating it, in
Well,
your mind,
I
and
think we're powerful enough to
yeah,
be able to create things like that. But I also think, the world is this planet is full of vortexes, ley lines. The ancients built ancient structures. Their structures over alleged stargates or power spots. So let's use, for example, again, let's go to Bigfoot, because primatologists will say, no, no, this is just like a species of sort that's been in hiding. Okay, let's say that. If they've been around all this time, they would know where the power spots are.
yep.
I mean, in my opinion, I mean, if you're able to have out of body experiences, for example, you would know where the power spots are. Like, I don't think it's all that inconceivable to think that there are beings here, even dimensionally or interdimensional, that know how to use what this planet has, and that's gateways.
There are
They're
definitely,
they're
yeah,
they're everywhere.
and that's the thing is like you just said. I mean, things can come in or they're ever existing. You get into
Sure.
the ether and everything is here. I used to see like in Chicago, I used to see a lot of shadows, walking around and whatever. And I'll never forget, I was training one of my clients, and there were three ladies in the room, and I remember
Right.
I go, "Do you look out the window and see that?" And they were like, "What is going on?" I go, "I don't know what's going on. What's here right
I don't wanna know what's going on.
went back and forth between the
Right.
windows. And I
Right.
remember my client Carrie at that time. Her and her friends were like, "I don't know if I'm coming back here, whatever." I go, "That's the thing." So I'm using that as an example, but
Right.
there's so many things existing at the same time. So yeah, like you said, if
Yes.
there's a portal, a gateway, a ley line,
Time shifts.
that might bring things in, or maybe certain things during certain time periods, during
Right.
full moons, eclipses, things like that. Maybe
Sure.
there's a thinning, they say a thinning of the veil. So then like there's a thinning where that allows things to kind of maybe be able to be here in the physical, but
Mhm.
also in the spiritual at the same time. Because
Sure.
I think of like when people pass, they're still here. They're
Yeah.
still around. They
Right.
sometimes they come as a hummingbird or something or whatever else, but they're still
Right.
here. They still have that presence. So I think it's just once again, it's us connecting back to like figuring these things out and kind of going into that. Otherwise, we just kind of think that like all of this is like fairy tales because we've been fed it
Right.
in movies, but I've started to realize that we are very powerful. We're very connected. We're very in tune. And the more in tune you become, it's
Yes.
just, it's wild what the actual body can do and perceive. And I've started
Right.
to learn even like dousing with my hand, because you can just pick up on energy spots just
Right.
based on your hands. You walk into a place and your
Right.
hands are antennas. So
Right.
I think, but if we feel that that can't happen, or we eat a lot of foods by Monsanto, that are trying to dim our
Right.
frequency, then we won't be able to perceive that or take that in, or it kind of gets too maybe scary, like you said, and then
Mhm.
people start going, "Oh my gosh, I don't."
Well, we hinder ourselves.
Yes, yes,
I think, I believe, I always say we're a species with amnesia. I believe that we just need to tap back into ourselves to be able to learn our true potential. And that's even tapping into the total consciousness. I did this experiment this one time. I've talked about this before, and I took this really obscure word that people haven't used in like in a million years, like swell. Who the hell uses swell anymore? Nobody uses swell. So I put it out there. Went, oh, that's really swell. Do you know? I started hearing people say it. I started seeing it on television. I'm going, see, that's just kind of creepy. Swell. But anyhow, it just shows that if you put in all of this phenomenal intention into the collective consciousness, that it does get picked up, like it just gets absorbed. It's a complete manifestation, you know. I don't know. I wish we had more time because I'd like to get into matrix stuff and all kinds of fun stuff. It would just be a lot of fun. But I really want to thank you for coming on the show. It was a lot of fun. And I loved everything you had to say. I'm really sorry about the channel. That just obviously somebody out there is a little bit frightened of some of the things that you're coming out. I think Dolly mentioned it earlier. Government's a bit concerned maybe about some of the things that you are educating people on.
I mean, people need to know. That's kind of how I see it, and that's why when the first time I ever got deleted on Instagram, I just decided I'm going to be everywhere. Then I'm going to put it on every platform, and I'm going to keep creating accounts, and I'm going to keep whatever. And then even with the TikTok thing, I decided, okay, well, I'm going to work on Telegram, and our
Right.
Telegram channel has grown tremendously, and I'm thankful for everybody coming and joining. But
Right.
I decided, okay, we'll do Telegram too. We'll do TikTok, we'll do YouTube, we'll do Rumble, whatever it may be,
Right.
because I
Right.
realize the information needs to be out there, because we've been lied to and deceived for so long.
Right.
And 2020 was like really the catalyst of just it gets old.
Right.
Same playbook as 1976, but
Right.
it gets really old. So my whole thing is, I hope that it can provide solutions. I hope that it can get people out of fear, and I hope that it can help with information to awaken the minds and provide people solutions. And even this
Right.
talk is just to talk about things that maybe instinctively people feel, and then they go,
Right.
I kind of, that makes more sense, than the mummies and the
Right.
pyramids and things like that, and I think that's what we need to do. We need to tap back into that, like our instinct.
Right.
But
Right.
other than TikTok, it is what it is. We keep going, and I'm thankful to
You
be here
keep
and thankful to
going.
talk to you and, be
Thank
able.
you. Well, we have millions of people who listen. We're an FM station, and so we have a lot of audio service. We do better audio, obviously, because we're FM, and we are in Roku. And I hope that, there's a lot of people who will go and seek you out and listen to all of these videos that you put out there, because there's a lot of really, really great information. And a lot of it is like, forever I've been saying blah, 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 blah. Some stuff I can't say and talk about that you've talked about, and you know why. But anyway, I said that exactly. I completely get this guy. And people would look at me and go, okay, Michelle. And I'd be like, now I'm just like, no. Now I can say, then I was just sending off links.
Yeah.
No, you need to listen to this because he explains it better than I do. But
Sometimes too, we overcomplicate things with our
yes,
descriptions, and that happens. Like when I used to first started making content, I would make it so complicated that when I look back, I go, I don't even know what I was trying to say. Like I was like trying to be like just too detailed. But I've tried to break things down and like you said, make it just straight to the point and simple. So that it's just really just an easy way to understand. Because like I said, even with our the sick care system and all the other stuff, got like 8,000 terms for why people, have an illness, but it's like,
Hmm.
you're just poisoning your body. You just
Yeah,
need
just cut to the chase. What do I have?
that's it.
Right,
Let's
right,
just keep it
right.
simple, because the simpler it is, the more it starts to make sense. And this whole journey for me, like all the topics we talked about today, it just, the simpler it gets, the easier it is to understand, rather
Right.
than like it's so complicated.
It
And then I'm
doesn't
just
have
like,
to be
how do
because
I
people are already confused. Vibration, frequency. I mean, Nikola Tesla talked about it. The whole world is based on mathematics, vibration, and frequency. But that really goes over a lot of people's heads. So I think if you break it down into more of a layman's terms, they're like, wait a minute, I get that. As to how it makes you feel and how certain things or certain people don't jive with our energy
Yep.
and foods, and that's but it's a really big thing. So I thank you for taking the time to do them all, and checking out the website. I know I have, and I will be putting it in order because I'm just all about it. So I've already sent it off to people as well. So tell everybody, of course, about what your website is. It's been up here flittering around, but just for our audio listeners.
So they can find more information on cultivateelevate.com. Our website has a plethora of information out there for blogs and all types of things. And then we have a bunch of different superfoods to help heal the different meridian pathways, because that's what I'm really big on, understanding what meridian pathway needs to be healed. Like pearl powder for the eyesight, dragon's blood for the skin, shilajit for detoxing, but just all different superfoods to just address the root cause. Because when I went to all the professionals, they would tell me it was genetic and I was getting older. And it just was always the same story. And what I really realized was, if I clean up my diet, I clean up my terrain, my body will just heal. And so
Yes.
that's what Elevate is all about. You can find us also on Telegram, Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, all Cultivate Elevate. There's a bunch of videos on there too, but I hope that the information can help resonate and also help provide you with a solution with anything that you're going through, or just general information to help heal your day.
Right, right. Well, I'm glad that Amelia found you. She's always on TikTok. And I said, I don't have that kind of time, Amelia. She goes, and she was always sending me your videos. I'm just like, okay, that sounds perfect. So I'm really glad we connected. I will email again and get you some links and things like that. And all of your links are also in the show description.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having me on. And if you ever want to do another, I'm sure we can do a bunch of rabbit holes.
I would love to do another. I think if we could piece together a few more, bits of content that will keep us here and not knock us off. Much as I would love to do one of those. Definitely, I would love to do it again.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure. And if anybody has any questions about any of the topics we talked, just send me a message. But you guys have a lovely night.
And you as well.
I'll see
Thank you very much, Matt. Take
you.
care. Bye-bye. Well, we've come to the end of another fantastic show. Bit of a slow start, of course, with internet issues. Thank you for that. But I'm glad that we were able to finally connect, and very informative show. Very informative. Too bad about, his account, because he had hundreds of thousands of followers, and thankfully, you guys can connect with him on other platforms and just go have a listen. I know that Amelia posted a few things on the Outer Realm Facebook page just to give you an idea of some of the things that he talks about. And as a lover of ancient history, I really enjoyed that part of everything. So, big thank you to Matt Roeske from Cultivate Elevate for joining us this evening. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee for sponsoring the show. Big thank you to Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker. Big thank you to Steve McGinnis. And next week, guys, well, actually, I won't say next week. I'm already ahead of myself again. Listen to me. Anyway, we're bringing back Alexander Chekeskowitz, who was, or he is, the author of Deja Vu, Has Everything Already Been? He's done part one with us. Just the archives went through the roof. He's just a talented young man. Age of 17, he wrote this book, and my gosh, I've read the book. It's phenomenal. Anyway, we're doing a part two, and he's going to be discussing not just Atlantis, but it's connections to other ancient civilizations, as well as talking about these civilizations. It was a pre-recorded show because he is in Poland, but I'm going to be in chat with you guys tomorrow night. It is phenomenal. It was always such a pleasure to interview Alexander. And I don't say interview because I don't think I ever interview anybody. As you can see, it really is just about having an amazing conversation. So check him out for part 2 tomorrow night. I will meet you guys in chat and we can converse that way. Until then, have a terrific Thursday and we'll